In the heart of a lavish mansion, a night of glamour and elegance takes a dark turn when a young girl, Louisa, is humiliated and expelled from a grand party because of the color of her skin. As tears fall, her mother, Marta, stands bravely by her side, ready to leave the opulence behind. But just as they reach the door, a powerful figure steps in, turning the tide with a shocking revelation. What follows is a night of tension, fear, and a lesson in dignity that no one will ever forget. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. At an opulent gathering held within the grandiose Villanueva estate, the night was supposed to be one of celebration and joy, with the soft glow of intricate lights illuminating the lush garden, and the sweet melodies of classical music weaving through the cool evening air. However, beneath the glittering facade, an ugly truth was about to surface, a truth that would leave everyone shaken to their core. Marta, a humble woman who worked tirelessly as a domestic servant for the Villanueva family, had been invited to this extravagant event, though not with any sense of true inclusion. She brought along her 10-year-old daughter, Louisa, hoping they could simply blend into the background and perhaps enjoy a rare moment of leisure. Little did they know that this night would scar them forever. As Louisa timidly wandered through the crowd, she was drawn to a group of children playing near a marble fountain. Her innocent hope was to join them, to perhaps find a friend among the privileged young ones. But that hope was swiftly crushed. Fernando, a boy with arrogance etched into his young face, looked at Louisa with a scorn that could pierce through steel. "You don't belong here," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. His eyes raked over Louisa's modest attire, as if her very presence was an insult to the grandeur of the evening. "You're nothing like us," he spat, each word laced with venom. Louisa felt the sting of those words deep in her heart. Tears welled up in her eyes as she instinctively stepped back, her small frame trembling with a mixture of fear and sadness. Marta, witnessing the cruelty inflicted upon her beloved daughter, rushed forward, her heart pounding with a mix of protective fury and heartbreak. "What is happening here?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her attempts to stay composed. But the anger in her eyes betrayed the turmoil within her. Before Fernando could further humiliate Louisa, his mother, Mrs. Laura Villanueva, swept in with cold authority. "Your daughter is causing a disturbance," she stated flatly, her voice devoid of empathy. "This is not a place for someone like her." The words hit Marta like a slap across the face. Her cheeks flushed with a mix of shame and rage. She wanted to scream, to demand justice for her child, but all she could muster was a tremulous response. "What do you mean by someone like her? My daughter has every right to be here, just like any other child." Don Alvaro, the powerful patriarch of the Villanueva family, interjected with icy calmness. "If you're going to cause trouble, perhaps it's best if you leave." The statement hung in the air like a dark cloud, the weight of his authority suffocating. The music ceased abruptly, leaving an eerie silence that amplified the tension. The other guests stared at Marta and Louisa, their gazes filled with judgment and disdain, as if the very sight of them sullied the evening's elegance. As Marta, her spirit battered but unbroken, began to lead Louisa away, an imposing figure suddenly emerged at the entrance of the mansion. The air shifted as the man stepped forward, Don Ramon, a man of immense influence and power, and unbeknownst to many, the true master behind the Villanueva empire. His mere presence demanded respect, and the murmurs of the crowd fell silent. Seeing the tears streaming down Louisa's face and the anguish etched on Marta's, Don Ramon's expression hardened into a mask of righteous fury. "What is happening here?" His voice thundered through the grand hall, each word resonating with an authority that could not be ignored. Marta halted in her tracks, the intensity of his voice freezing her in place. The night had taken a turn that no one could have anticipated. The very foundation of the Villanueva family's power was about to be shaken, all because they dared to belittle a child whose lineage was far more significant than they could have ever imagined. Don Alvaro's face turned ashen the moment he recognized Don Ramon. He struggled to find his voice, his mouth opening and closing without producing a sound. Mrs. Laura Villanueva, sensing the danger of the situation, quickly interjected, hoping to steer the narrative to their favor. These two were causing a disruption, she said, her voice quivering with barely concealed panic. Don Ramon's gaze shifted from Luisa to Marta and then settled on the Villanuevas with a piercing intensity that made everyone in the room hold their breath. His next words fell like a hammer, shattering the tense silence. "That girl is my granddaughter," he declared, his voice unwavering, carrying the weight of undeniable truth. The effect of his revelation was immediate and profound, as if a bolt of lightning had struck in the middle of the room. Shock rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged bewildered glances, their whispers swelling into a wave of astonishment. The Villanuevas, pale and visibly shaken, could do nothing but stand there, paralyzed by the realization of the gravity of their actions. Don Ramon's eyes never left Don Alvaro as he spoke again, his tone now dangerously calm. "Alvaro, we need to have a conversation right now." Alvaro's legs began to tremble uncontrollably as dread crept up his spine. The fear of what Don Ramon might say or do next was almost too much for him to bear. Marta and Luisa, still clutching each other, felt a flicker of hope ignite within them, their tears now mingled with the relief that justice might finally be on their side. The entire room was engulfed in a suffocating silence as Don Ramon guided Alvaro to a secluded corner, away from the prying eyes of the guests. Marta watched closely, noticing the stark fear etched into Alvaro's face as he followed, his complexion growing paler with each step. It was clear that Alvaro was on the brink of collapsing under the weight of his guilt and fear. When Don Ramon finally spoke, his words were measured, but the anger simmering beneath them was unmistakable. "Alvaro, you have served me for many years. I never imagined that you would permit such a vile act against my own flesh and blood in your household." Alvaro swallowed hard, his throat dry, words failing him once again. "Don Ramon, I didn't know that Luisa was your granddaughter. If I had known." "You would have acted differently," Don Ramon interrupted, his voice now carrying a sharp edge. "Is that what it takes for you to treat a child with dignity and respect? Must you know of my connections before deciding who deserves to be treated with decency?" His words cut through the air, leaving Alvaro mute and shaking, unable to defend himself. Mrs. Laura Villanueva, who had remained silent, finally tried to intervene, but the icy glare from Don Ramon silenced her before she could utter a word. She stood there, frozen, her earlier arrogance now completely dissolved into fear. As this confrontation unfolded, the guests around the room began to murmur, their voices filled with curiosity, confusion, and a growing sense of unease. The tension was palpable, thick enough to be cut with a knife. Marta, seeing an opportunity to speak to the room, stepped forward. Her voice, though soft, carried a conviction that demanded attention. "Let tonight be a lesson to all of us," she said, her eyes sweeping across the room. "No one, regardless of their background or status, should ever be stripped of their dignity. Respect is not a privilege, it is a right that every human being deserves." Her words hung in the air, resonating with a truth that could not be denied. The night, meant to be a celebration, had become a stark reminder of the cruelty that often hides beneath the surface of polite society. And as the weight of Don Ramon's revelation continued to settle in, it was clear that this evening would be one no one would ever forget. Don Ramon, after an agonizing moment of internal conflict, stepped back into the spotlight of the grand hall, flanked by Marta and Luisa. The air was thick with anticipation, the music having long since died away, leaving only a heavy silence in its wake. Every gaze in the room was fixed on him, waiting for his words. "Tonight has unveiled more than we ever expected," he began, his voice resonating with a stern yet sorrowful authority. What we have witnessed is not just a failure in empathy, but also the unyielding resolve of a mother and the unbreakable spirit of a child. My granddaughter Louisa, in her innocence, has displayed a level of grace and dignity that surpasses many here. He then shifted his focus to Alvaro and his wife, his eyes piercing through them like daggers. I urge you to contemplate deeply on the events that have transpired. I demand not just an apology, but concrete actions to amend the wrongs that have been inflicted. Know this: my support for your family is now under serious reconsideration. Alvaro, sensing the weight of the situation, felt the chill of reality seep into his bones as he nodded gravely. We will do whatever is necessary to make things right, Don Ramon, not merely out of obligation, but because it is the only honorable course. Marta, still wary yet relieved, wrapped her arms around Louisa, who nestled into her mother's embrace, seeking solace from the storm that had passed. What had begun as a night of shame and degradation had transformed into a beacon of potential redemption. Yet Alvaro, Laura, and the others who had tormented little Louisa remained blissfully unaware of the reckoning that loomed just beyond the horizon. Their lives, once cushioned by opulence, indulgence, and a cruel disregard for the vulnerable, were on the brink of an upheaval so profound that even the most perceptive among them could not foresee the dark days that lay ahead. If this story resonates with you, I would be deeply honored by your support. A simple subscription would mean the world to me and enable me to continue crafting and sharing stories like this. Thank you in advance for your kindness, and may many blessings come your way. The following morning, Alvaro found himself pacing the confines of his study, his mind racing with schemes to salvage his tarnished pride. The public scorn he had endured at the hands of Don Ramon had struck at the very core of his ego, leaving him seething with resentment. He immediately summoned his most trusted advisors, a cadre chosen for their loyalty and ruthless intellect. We must devise a plan to reclaim control, Alvaro declared, his voice tight with barely restrained fury as he slammed his fist onto the table. I will not allow Don Ramon to dictate the fate of our family or our business. Laura, her tone laced with a vengeful edge, suggested perhaps we could uncover something in Don Ramon's past, something that would force him to retreat from our affairs. One advisor, a man known for his cunning and cold calculation, leaned forward with a sinister glint in his eye. A discreet investigation into his history might reveal vulnerabilities. Even a man like Don Ramon has secrets he'd rather keep hidden. Alvaro, torn between disgust and a fierce desire for retribution, nodded slowly, his mind already turning over the possibilities. Do it. Dig up whatever dirt you can find. I will not let this incident be the downfall of our legacy. While Alvaro and Laura were quietly setting their plans into motion, Marta was already several steps ahead, fortifying her own position to ensure that the foundation she envisioned wasn't merely a symbolic gesture, but a powerful force for change. Fully aware of Alvaro's potential attempts to sabotage her efforts, especially after the previous night's events, Marta swiftly organized a meeting with key allies and potential sponsors. She understood that securing their support was crucial to the foundation's success. This foundation is far more than just a reaction to the shame we experienced last night, Marta addressed the gathering of influential figures, her voice resolute and filled with purpose. It represents a deep, unwavering commitment to transforming the way our community addresses and combats discrimination and exclusion. We have an opportunity to create lasting change, and we cannot afford to let this slip through our fingers. One of the attendees, a prominent businessman with considerable sway, leaned forward, his interest piqued. Your vision is admirable, but how do you plan to ensure that the foundation achieves the significant impact you're aiming for, especially in the face of inevitable resistance? Marta met his gaze with unflinching determination. Our strategy is rooted in transparency, accountability, and collaboration. We aren't here to make enemies. Our goal is to build bridges across divides. But make no mistake, we will fiercely defend our principles against anyone who seeks to derail our mission. Her words, infused with a quiet strength, resonated deeply with many in the room, solidifying their support and commitment to the cause. Meanwhile, Alvaro, bolstered by Laura's silent encouragement, proceeded with their plan to dig up dirt on Don Ramon. They enlisted the services of a seasoned private investigator, someone skilled in unearthing the kind of skeletons that could bring even the most respected individuals to their knees. The investigator wasted no time, delving into the murky corners of Don Ramon's past, searching for any misstep or association that could be exploited. Weeks later, Alvaro and Laura were summoned to a clandestine meeting under the cover of night, the location chosen for its privacy and seclusion. The tension was palpable as the investigator laid out a series of documents and photographs on the table before them. "I believe I've found something that could be of great use to you," he said, pointing to a trail of questionable financial transactions and dubious connections dating back decades. "It's old, but it could severely damage Don Ramon's reputation if it were to come to light." Alvaro's eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and vindication as he pored over the findings, already envisioning the downfall of his rival. But as he reveled in his potential victory, Marta received a mysterious phone call that same afternoon. The anonymous voice on the other end issued a stark warning about the investigation unfolding against Don Ramon. Alarmed but unshaken, Marta immediately contacted Don Ramon, sharing the ominous news. Though visibly disturbed, Don Ramon remained composed, his voice tinged with a weary wisdom. "Thank you, Marta. I had a feeling Alvaro might resort to something like this. We must act swiftly, not only to safeguard my reputation but to ensure the foundation remains untarnished. The stakes are too high to falter now." With renewed resolve, Marta and Don Ramon began preparing their defense, knowing that the battle for their cause had only just begun. The conflict brewing in the shadows was about to erupt into a full-blown confrontation, one that would test their courage, integrity, and the strength of their convictions like never before. United in their resolve, Don Ramon and Marta decided to take bold action by organizing a press conference to preempt Alvaro's attempt to tarnish Don Ramon's reputation. Their strategy was to turn the tables by revealing the existence of the investigation themselves, framing it as a demonstration of Don Ramon's commitment to transparency and integrity. The sudden announcement of the press conference sent ripples through the community, with journalists and residents alike buzzing with speculation as they gathered in the auditorium. As Don Ramon and Marta stepped onto the stage, a palpable tension filled the room, everyone eager to hear what had brought them together so unexpectedly. Don Ramon began with a calm yet commanding presence, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. I stand before you to address a matter that holds great significance, not only for me personally, but for our community and the future of the foundation we have all worked so hard to build. Recently, it has come to light that certain individuals have initiated an investigation into my past, aiming to discredit my integrity and the work we are doing here." He paused, his eyes meeting the camera with unwavering resolve. "Let me be clear, I have nothing to conceal. This investigation, orchestrated by parties I will not name out of respect, is a deliberate attempt to undermine the progress we are making. But I believe that the essence of true leadership lies in transparency and accountability. And I am here today to demonstrate both." Marta then took the microphone, her voice filled with conviction as she echoed Don Ramon's sentiments. "This foundation was born out of a desire to confront discrimination, inequality, and exclusion head-on. We refuse to be intimidated by these deceitful tactics. Our mission is unwavering, and with the steadfast support of this community, we will continue our work undeterred." The press conference had an immediate and powerful impact. The public, moved by Don Ramon's forthrightness and the integrity he displayed, rallied behind him and the foundation. As the news spread, it became clear that Alvaro and Laura's plot had not only failed to harm Don Ramon but had, in fact, backfired spectacularly. Instead of tarnishing his reputation, the investigation reinforced his image as a leader of honesty and moral strength. The community's perception of the Villanuevas shifted dramatically, with many now viewing them as desperate and underhanded, willing to go to any lengths to protect their own interests. As Alvaro and Laura watched their plans unravel, they found themselves increasingly isolated. Former allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal that had backfired so spectacularly. The weight of their miscalculations bore down heavily, and Alvaro, realizing the full extent of their errors, decided that a direct confrontation with Don Ramon was his last hope to salvage something from the wreckage. In a final, desperate move, Alvaro reached out to Don Ramon, requesting a private meeting in a secluded, neutral location. His mind raced with the possibilities: could he negotiate a truce, or at the very least, minimize the damage? As the meeting approached, Alvaro knew that everything now hung in the balance, his fate resting on this one last chance to make amends or risk losing everything he had worked for. When the two men finally came face to face, the air between them was thick with tension, the weight of their unspoken history pressing down on the room. Alvaro, his usual confidence shaken, was the first to speak. "Don Ramon, I believe we both have made some errors in judgment, and I'm here in the hope that we can find a resolution, one that avoids further conflict." His voice carried a mix of desperation and strained diplomacy, as he sought a way to salvage what remained of his crumbling position. He continued, grasping at straws, "I understand that you hold the advantage now, but surely there's something I can offer to make amends, to set things right between us." Don Ramon listened in silence, his stern expression revealing nothing. He allowed the uncomfortable pause to stretch on, giving Alvaro just enough time to realize the futility of his words. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, yet it carried the weight of a man who had reached an unshakable decision. "Alvaro, this situation is not merely about what has transpired over the past few weeks. It's a deeper issue, a question of character and principles. Through your actions, you've shown me who you truly are, and I cannot, in good conscience, continue any form of relationship with you, be it personal or professional." Alvaro felt the color drain from his face as the finality of Don Ramon's words took hold. There was no room left for negotiation, no possibility of redemption in this conversation. Don Ramon had made his decision, and it was as solid as stone. Don Ramon then added, his tone softening just slightly, "My only counsel to you now is to take a hard look at your actions and consider changing your ways before it's too late. A man without allies, without respect, is left in a very lonely and desolate place." With those words, the meeting was over. Alvaro left the room, feeling the cold grip of inevitability tightening around him. He knew then that his empire, his influence, was unraveling before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The next day, Marta received a call from Don Ramon. His voice, calm yet appreciative, conveyed his deep gratitude. "Marta, I wanted to personally thank you for standing by my side. Your support has been invaluable, and I want you to know that the Foundation will receive even more resources and backing to expand its reach, together. We've turned a crisis into an opportunity, a chance for true growth and redemption." The story of Marta, Luisa, and Don Ramon quickly became a powerful symbol within the community, a beacon of resilience and the triumph of integrity over deceit. The foundation they nurtured flourished, growing into a respected institution that provided support and hope to countless individuals and families. Through their perseverance and unwavering commitment to justice, they demonstrated that even in the face of adversity, strength of character and the courage to stand up for what is right could lead to profound and lasting change. As for Alvaro and Laura, their once glorious presence in the social elite gradually withered away, their names now synonymous with disgrace and moral collapse. They became ghostly figures in a world that once celebrated them, their influence and power evaporating as their legacy crumbled. But amid their downfall, the most enduring lesson emerged from the quiet strength of Marta, who imparted a timeless truth to her daughter, Louisa, that dignity, courage, and integrity far outweigh the ephemeral allure of wealth and social status. The events at the Villanueva mansion that fateful night would be forever etched in the community's memory as the catalyst that led to the fall of a once mighty family and the rise of a movement devoted to justice and equality. If this story resonated with you, please remember to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and share it with those you care about. Many more stories are coming your way. Your support means everything. Thank you. As Marta's leadership role expanded, so did the challenges she faced, particularly within a company that was resistant to change. With each passing day, she found herself embroiled in battles on multiple fronts, pushing her to the brink of exhaustion. One afternoon, overwhelmed and frustrated, she stormed into Don Ramon's office, her emotions spilling over. "Ramon, I can't continue like this," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of her burden. "If the culture of this company doesn't change, they won't just destroy me, they'll destroy you and everything you've built." Don Ramon, seeing the strain etched on Marta's face, realized the gravity of the situation. "You're right, Marta," he replied, his voice resolute. "I will do whatever it takes to change things. I won't let them destroy you or our family." But the company was on the verge of an unprecedented crisis. A string of reckless decisions made by corrupt executives who had since been dismissed had brought the business to the brink of bankruptcy. When the news broke to the press, the business community watched with a mix of morbid curiosity and anticipation, eager to see how the mighty would fall. In an emergency meeting, Don Ramon, Marta, and the company's top leaders gathered around a conference table, their expressions marked by a deep-seated anxiety. "We have to act fast if we're going to save this company," Don Ramon stated, his voice carrying the urgency of the moment. Marta, poring over the financial documents, identified the critical areas of concern. "We need an immediate restructuring plan, but even more crucial is the need to unite as a team. If we fail to come together, everything we do will be in vain." The internal resistance was palpable, yet the severity of the crisis forced some to reevaluate their positions. However, Joaquin, one of the most influential figures in the company, openly voiced his skepticism. "Why should we follow your lead, Marta? You lack the experience needed to navigate a crisis of this magnitude," he said, his tone laced with condescension and doubt. Marta met Joaquin's gaze with unyielding resolve. "I may not have the experience you're looking for, but I have something far more important: the determination to do whatever it takes to save this company, and the unwavering support of Don Ramon. I'm here to protect the livelihoods of thousands of employees, and I won't back down." Sensing the growing tension, Don Ramon stepped in, his voice firm. "Joaquin, if you're unable to work under Marta's leadership, perhaps it's time for you to reconsider your role here. This crisis demands our full cooperation, and there's no room for hesitation or division." With Don Ramon's unequivocal support, Marta's authority was cemented, and the company began to rally behind her vision. The internal strife, while still present, was gradually overshadowed by the collective urgency to save the company. Under Marta's determined leadership, the business embarked on a difficult but necessary journey of transformation. The experience forged a new culture within the company, one built on resilience, collaboration, and the shared goal of recovery. Through sheer willpower and a relentless pursuit of what was right, Marta led the company out of the abyss, proving that true leadership is not about having all the answers, but about having the courage to face challenges head-on and inspire others to do the same. Don Ramon's declaration made it unequivocally clear that loyalty and cooperation were no longer optional, they were now essential for survival. The atmosphere within the company grew increasingly tense as the pressure mounted, but the leadership, bolstered by Don Ramon's resolve, was unwavering in its commitment to confronting the crisis with courage and unity. Marta and Don Ramon threw themselves into the task of implementing the restructuring plan, working tirelessly around the clock. What began as days quickly blurred into sleepless nights, with every decision carrying the weight of the company's future. As employees observed Marta's relentless dedication and the personal sacrifices she made, even the most reluctant began to soften, slowly coming to respect and trust her leadership. However, just as the restructuring seemed to be gaining momentum, an unexpected blow struck. In the midst of their efforts to save the company, a devastating twist revealed a dark undercurrent within Don Ramon's own inner circle. Anonymous documents and emails began arriving, exposing a conspiracy among some of the most trusted executives' individuals who were secretly working to sabotage the restructuring efforts from within. The betrayal was like a knife in the back, cutting deep into the fabric of trust that had held the leadership team together. One afternoon, while reviewing reports, Marta received an anonymous email that made her blood run cold. Attached were files containing irrefutable evidence of the treachery, implicating several top executives in a plot to undermine the company's recovery. Heart pounding, she immediately took the evidence to Don Ramon. "Ramon, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "We're not just dealing with an external crisis, we have enemies within our own walls." As Don Ramon scanned the documents, a storm of emotions surged within him: betrayal, anger, and deep sorrow. "I can't believe this," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "These people, they've been with me for years." Determined to root out the betrayal, they swiftly called for an urgent meeting with the implicated executives. The atmosphere in the boardroom was thick with tension, every glance laced with suspicion and mistrust. Don Ramon began, his voice laced with steely resolve. "We have undeniable evidence that some of you have been acting against the interests of this company. This behavior is utterly unacceptable." Manuel, one of the accused, attempted to defend himself, his voice laced with desperation. "This is a misunderstanding. There's no betrayal, just miscommunications and poor decisions." Marta, holding the incriminating emails, confronted him without hesitation. "These documents are not mere misunderstandings, Manuel. They are clear proof of deliberate betrayal. How do you justify this?" The room fell into a heavy silence as the accused executives fumbled for words, their guilt laid bare for all to see. Don Ramon, his expression hardening with resolve, made the difficult but necessary decision. "Manuel and everyone involved in this treachery, you are all fired with immediate effect. I will not allow your actions to destroy everything we've worked so hard to build." The news of the mass firing rippled through the company, sending shockwaves of both relief and anxiety among the employees. While some felt a sense of justice and newfound hope, others were gripped by fear of what might come next. The removal of the traitors marked a turning point, allowing the company to slowly stabilize. Marta, now more empowered than ever, took on an even more decisive role, proving her ability to lead with both strength and integrity. Her influence grew, and with it, the respect and admiration of those who remained loyal to the cause. However, Marta's rise did not go unnoticed by Alvaro, who watched with growing unease. Her success posed a direct threat to his own power and influence, driven by a mix of envy and fear. Alvaro began plotting his next move, determined to regain the upper hand and eliminate the woman who had become his most formidable adversary. The stage was set for a new conflict, one that would test Marta's resolve and Don Ramon's legacy like never before. Furious over the recent turn of events, Alvaro summoned Laura and his closest confidants to a clandestine meeting at his mansion. The room was thick with tension, his anger palpable. "We can't let Marta and Don Ramon win this battle," Alvaro began, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "If we allow them to continue, everything we've built will crumble." Laura, ever the strategist, leaned forward with a calculating gleam in her eye. We need to strike where it hurts the most, something that will leave them gasping for air, a blow that will utterly destroy their credibility. Perhaps we can exploit Marta's story, twist it into something that makes them appear incompetent and dishonest. Alvaro's eyes narrowed as a sinister smile curled at the corners of his lips. Perfect. Let's set a trap, an event where we can publicly humiliate Marta. If we can expose any weakness, her downfall will be inevitable. With this devious plan in mind, Laura used her extensive network to organize an extravagant charity event, the kind of high society gathering where reputations could be made or shattered. Marta was invited as the keynote speaker, completely unaware that she was walking into a carefully orchestrated ambush. On the night of the event, the venue was adorned with opulent decorations, the atmosphere buzzing with the chatter of the city's elite. Marta arrived with Luisa by her side, both dressed in elegant attire, ready to represent the foundation and share its mission with the influential crowd. The evening began smoothly, with Marta and Luisa mingling with the guests, unaware of the malicious intent lurking beneath the surface. As Marta took the stage to deliver her speech, Alvaro and Laura exchanged a knowing glance, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Marta spoke passionately about the foundation's work, her words resonating with the audience until Laura abruptly interrupted, feigning concern. "Excuse me, Marta," Laura called out, her voice laced with false urgency. "Before we proceed, I believe it's imperative that everyone knows the truth about who's leading this foundation." The room fell into a hushed silence, all eyes turning to Laura as she stepped forward, a folder clutched in her hand. "In my possession, I have documents that raise serious concerns about Marta's integrity," Laura announced, her voice cold and accusing. She began reading from the folder, twisting facts and fabricating lies designed to tarnish Marta's reputation. These documents suggest that Marta has been misusing foundation funds for her own personal gain, betraying the trust of those who support her. Marta, caught off guard but determined to maintain her composure, stepped toward Laura, her voice steady. "These accusations are baseless lies. Every fund we handle is meticulously audited and transparent. This is nothing more than a desperate attempt to discredit me." But the damage had been done. The seed of doubt had been planted, and the room buzzed with murmurs as uncertainty spread among the attendees. Some, swayed by Laura's performance, began to question Marta's character. Others, feeling uncomfortable with the unfolding drama, quietly excused themselves and left the event, their trust shaken. Despite Marta's attempts to defend herself, the carefully laid trap had succeeded in creating a cloud of suspicion around her. Alvaro and Laura watched with satisfaction as the audience's confidence in Marta began to erode, their sinister plan taking root. However, Marta knew that this battle was far from over. While the night had dealt a heavy blow, she was resolute in her determination to clear her name and expose the truth behind Alvaro and Laura's deceit. This would not be the end of her fight. She would rise above this treachery and prove, once and for all, the strength of her character and the righteousness of her cause. "This won't end here," Alvaro, Marta said, her voice firm and her eyes blazing with resolve as she confronted him. "I won't let you destroy my reputation or the foundation with your lies." Alvaro, with a smirk of arrogance, replied, "We'll see how long you can stay standing, Marta. This is just the beginning." If you're enjoying the twists and turns of this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what our characters have done so far. Your feedback is invaluable, and if you find the story compelling, I'd be honored to have your support. Subscribing to the channel would help me tremendously in continuing to bring you the best stories. Thank you again for your kindness and support. Many blessings to you. Now let's dive back into the story, because the best is yet to come. Though Marta and Luisa were shaken by the vicious ambush at the charity event, they left with their heads held high, steeling themselves for the battle that lay ahead. The next day, however, they awoke to a barrage of sensational headlines splashed across newspapers and social media, all questioning Marta's integrity and casting doubt on the foundation's reputation. The lies had taken root, and both Marta's name and the foundation were at risk of being permanently tarnished. At Don Ramon's house, a tense meeting took place. Marta, with dark circles under her eyes from a night of sleepless worry, sat with Don Ramon and Luisa to discuss their next move. Her voice, though weary, was filled with determination. "We can't let these lies destroy us. We have to act quickly to clear our name and protect everything we've built." Don Ramon, despite the gravity of the situation, remained a pillar of support. "Marta, we've faced tough times before, and we'll overcome this too. But we need a clear and decisive strategy to counter this attack." It was then that Luisa, showing a level of insight and determination well beyond her years, spoke up with conviction. "We should use social media to tell our truth, to show everyone the real evidence of the foundation's transparency, and to expose Alvaro and Laura's deceit for what it truly is." Marta, considering her daughter's words, nodded in agreement. "You're right, Luisa. We can't just rely on traditional media outlets, which can be manipulated. We need to reach out directly to the people, to those who believe in our cause and want to see justice served." With this new plan in mind, they set to work. Marta and Luisa began gathering all the documentation that demonstrated the foundation's financial integrity, from audit reports to testimonials from beneficiaries. They filmed heartfelt videos explaining the truth, showcasing their dedication to the foundation's mission, and directly addressing the false accusations leveled against them. They posted these videos across social media platforms, urging their supporters to share them widely. As the days passed, the tide began to turn. Supporters rallied behind Marta and the foundation, sharing their story and flooding social media with messages of solidarity. People began to see through the smear campaign orchestrated by Alvaro and Laura, recognizing it for the desperate and deceitful ploy it was. The truth started to spread faster than the lies, and the public sentiment shifted in Marta's favor. Meanwhile, Alvaro and Laura watched in frustration as their plan began to unravel. The more they tried to discredit Marta, the more the public saw them as the villains of the story. The foundation's reputation, once under threat, was now stronger than ever, bolstered by the unwavering support of a community that refused to let lies prevail over truth. The battle was far from over, but Marta, Luisa, and Don Ramon had regained the upper hand. With renewed confidence, they prepared for the next phase of the fight, knowing that they had the strength of their convictions and the truth on their side. The story was no longer just about survival, it was about triumphing over adversity and standing tall in the face of deceit. Marta and her team wasted no time in gathering all the necessary evidence to prove the foundation's transparency. They decided the best way to reach the public and counter the lies was to hold a live broadcast where Marta and Luisa would address the audience directly, exposing the falsehoods and presenting irrefutable evidence of their integrity. On the night of the broadcast, Marta and Luisa sat before the camera, surrounded by a meticulously organized array of documents, charts, and reports that laid bare the truth of their management. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but the resolve in their eyes was unwavering, ready to confront the lies head-on. "Good evening," Marta began, her voice steady and strong. "Tonight I want to speak directly to you, without any intermediaries. The accusations made against us are not just false, they are malicious attempts to destroy the work we've dedicated our lives to. We are here to prove, beyond any doubt, that these claims are baseless." Luisa then took the spotlight, holding up charts and documents for the camera to see. "These are the full audits of the foundation from the last several years. Every donation, every expense, every penny is accounted for. Everything is documented with complete transparency. We have absolutely nothing to hide." As the broadcast continued, the tide on social media began to shift. Viewers who had initially been swayed by the accusations started to see the truth, their comments reflecting a growing support for Marta and Luisa. But the most intense moment of the broadcast came when Marta directly addressed Alvaro and Laura. "Alvaro, Laura," she said, her voice hardening, "I know you're watching this. You know that everything you've said is a lie, and I won't stop until justice is served. You will be held accountable for your actions, and I will make sure of it." The live broadcast was a resounding success. Public support began to return as people recognized the integrity and honesty that Marta and Luisa had demonstrated. However, Marta was fully aware that the battle was far from over. Alvaro and Laura were not the type to give up easily, and the threat they posed still loomed large. Realizing that their initial plan was falling apart, Alvaro and Laura decided to escalate their efforts. They convened a secret meeting with several of the employees who had been fired by Don Ramon, hoping to exploit their bitterness and offer them rewards in exchange for false testimonies that could further damage Marta and the foundation. In a dimly lit room, Alvaro addressed the disgruntled group, his tone smooth yet sinister. "We need you to testify against Marta," he said, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. "Tell the world that she manipulated the foundation's funds, that she abused her power. If you cooperate, there will be benefits that could make your troubles disappear." The room was silent for a moment, the former employees exchanging uncertain glances. Some, driven by anger and resentment, were tempted by the offer. Others, however, hesitated, aware of the moral and legal implications of what they were being asked to do. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of the decision. Alvaro and Laura waited, their confidence growing as they watched the conflicted expressions on the faces before them. They believed that with enough pressure, they could turn these former employees into weapons against Marta. However, what Alvaro and Laura underestimated was the strength of the truth and the resilience of those who had witnessed Marta's integrity firsthand. Some of the former employees, despite their grievances, knew deep down that Marta had always acted in the best interest of the foundation and the people it served. As the night wore on, the group began to fracture, some ready to accept the bribe, while others grappled with the weight of conscience. This moral conflict would set the stage for the next chapter in the battle between Marta and her adversaries. The stakes were higher than ever, and the outcome would depend not just on who could spin the best story, but on who could hold fast to their principles in the face of overwhelming pressure. One of the former employees, Ricardo, hesitated, sensing the weight of the situation. "This is very risky. If we're found out, the consequences will be severe," he voiced, his concern palpable. Laura, with a cold, calculating smile, replied smoothly, "Don't worry. We have contacts who can ensure your testimonies are taken seriously. Besides, think of what you'll gain: a fresh start, a new life. It's worth the risk." With those reassurances, Ricardo and the others agreed, setting Alvaro and Laura's devious plan in motion. However, one member of the group, Carla, couldn't shake her unease. That night, after the meeting, her conscience gnawed at her, pushing her to take a different course of action. She decided to contact Marta in secret. Marta was in her office, deep in thought as she reviewed documents, when her phone rang. The voice on the other end was low, almost whispering, and carried a nervous tremor. "Marta, this is Carla, one of those fired by Don Ramon. I need to talk to you. There's something you should know." Marta, intrigued and a bit apprehensive, agreed to meet Carla in a nearby park under the cover of night. When she arrived, she spotted Carla sitting on a bench, her posture tense and her eyes darting around, clearly nervous. "Thank you for coming," Marta Carla began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't go through with this. Alvaro and Laura are planning to use false testimonies to bring you down. They've offered money to several of us to lie about you and the foundation." Marta felt a surge of mixed emotions: relief that someone was willing to come forward, and anger at the lengths Alvaro and Laura were willing to go. "Carla, are you willing to testify against them?" We need solid evidence to dismantle their plan." Carla, though clearly frightened, nodded resolutely. "Yes, I'm willing. I can't stand by and let these lies ruin lives." Together, Marta and Carla quickly devised a plan to record a confession from Alvaro, which could then be used as damning evidence. The stakes were incredibly high, and any mistake could have catastrophic consequences. They decided that Carla would set up a fake meeting with Alvaro, during which she would wear a hidden microphone to capture his incriminating words. The meeting was arranged at a discreet restaurant, chosen for its privacy. Carla, though visibly anxious, steeled herself as she sat across from Alvaro, who remained blissfully unaware of the trap being laid for him. During their conversation, Carla carefully steered the discussion toward the conspiracy. With a subtle push, she managed to get Alvaro to reveal his plan. "All you have to do is follow the script we've prepared. We'll take care of the rest," Alvaro said, his voice dripping with confidence, completely unaware that every word was being recorded. That same night, Marta and Carla rushed to Don Ramon's home, the recording in hand. After listening to the incriminating evidence, Don Ramon's face hardened with determination. "This is enough to bring them down, Marta. We need to take this to the authorities and clear your name once and for all." The revelation of this betrayal and the new twist in events added an intense layer of intrigue and danger to the already volatile situation. Marta knew that while the battle was far from over, she now held a crucial advantage, a weapon that could finally turn the tide in her favor. Armed with the recording, Don Ramon, Marta, and Carla made their way to the district attorney's office. The office was bustling, but the seriousness of the evidence they carried ensured they were seen immediately. The prosecutor, intrigued and disturbed by the gravity of the case, listened intently to the recording. "This is very serious," he said, his tone grave as the recording finished playing. "We can use this evidence to open a formal investigation against Alvaro and Laura. With this, we have a strong case to hold them accountable for their actions." With the legal machinery now in motion, Alvaro and Laura's carefully constructed web of deceit began to unravel. The authorities moved swiftly, gathering more evidence and testimonies, while Marta and Don Ramon prepared to reclaim their reputation and the foundation's integrity. The tide had turned, but Marta knew the battle wasn't over until justice was fully served. With determination and newfound allies by her side, she was ready to see it through to the end. Marta, filled with gratitude and resolve, responded to the prosecutor, "We seek justice, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has been manipulated and harmed by Alvaro and Laura's deceit." Meanwhile, the atmosphere at Alvaro's mansion had turned from tense to outright chaotic. Laura, sensing the walls closing in, was overcome with paranoia. Every creak of the floorboards, every ring of the phone, set her on edge. When the unexpected call from the prosecutor came, it confirmed her worst fears. "Mr. Alvaro, Mrs." Laura, the voice on the other end, said, cool and professional, "We are opening an official investigation into the accusations against you. I strongly advise you to prepare to cooperate." This sudden and devastating development sent shockwaves through Alvaro and Laura's world. Panic quickly set in as they fully grasped the magnitude of their predicament. The intricate web of lies they had painstakingly woven was beginning to unravel before their eyes, and with each passing moment they were losing control. The days that followed were a whirlwind of desperate legal consultations, frantic phone calls to allies who were now growing scarce, and futile attempts to salvage what remained of their reputation. For Marta, Don Ramon, and Carla, the tide had finally turned. The momentum was now on their side, and with the legal system backing them, they began to prepare for the court battles that lay ahead. They knew that the truth was the most powerful weapon they could wield, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Marta felt a flicker of hope and a renewed sense of determination that justice would be served. Alvaro, having just hung up the phone after the prosecutor's call, stood motionless, his face drained of color, but his eyes burning with fury. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. Then louder, with a mix of desperation and anger, "We need a strategy, and fast. We cannot let this destroy us." In the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with tension as both sides faced off. Marta and Don Ramon, flanked by their legal team, sat with an air of quiet confidence, the weight of the truth bolstering their resolve. Across the aisle, Alvaro and Laura struggled to maintain their composure, the stress of the situation etched deeply into their faces. The courtroom was packed, with reporters and spectators eager to witness the drama unfold. The pivotal moment came when Carla's recording was played for the court. As the damning words echoed through the room, the silence that followed was deafening. Alvaro's confident facade began to crack as the gravity of the evidence became undeniable. The recording laid bare the conspiracy, leaving no room for doubt about the lengths to which Alvaro and Laura had gone to sabotage Marta and the Foundation. The judge, after a moment of silence, addressed the court. "The evidence presented here is substantial and deeply troubling. This recording in particular clearly shows a deliberate attempt to deceive and manipulate, actions that cannot be taken lightly." As the proceedings continued, it became increasingly clear that Alvaro and Laura's fate was sealed. Their attempts to refute the evidence were weak and unconvincing, and the weight of the truth was simply too overwhelming. The prosecution methodically dismantled their defense, leaving them with little to cling to. For Marta, Don Ramon, and Carla, this was the culmination of their long and arduous struggle. They had fought with everything they had, armed only with the truth and their unwavering belief in justice. Now, as the court neared its verdict, Marta felt a deep sense of vindication. The lies and schemes that had threatened to destroy her were being exposed, and those responsible were finally being held accountable. The judge's final ruling would soon be delivered, but in that moment, Marta knew that whatever the outcome, she had already won. She had stood up against the forces that sought to bring her down, and in doing so, she had not only protected her own integrity, but also set a powerful example for others. Justice was within reach, and with it, the hope of a brighter future for the Foundation and all those it served. It is evident that Alvaro and Laura attempted to manipulate the truth and damage the reputation of Marta, and Don Ramon declared the prosecutor, his voice resonating with authority as it echoed through the silent courtroom. Such actions cannot and will not be tolerated in our society. In a desperate bid to save himself, Alvaro tried one last, frantic move. "This is a setup." Everything was manipulated, he shouted, his finger trembling as he pointed accusingly at Marta and Don Ramon. But the judge, calm and unshaken by the outburst, responded with finality, "Mr. Alvaro, the evidence presented is conclusive and overwhelming. You must now face the consequences of your actions." The evidence against Alvaro and Laura was irrefutable, and the verdict came swiftly. The court found them guilty of conspiracy and defamation, handing down a sentence that included substantial compensation to Marta and the Foundation, along with a prison term for both Alvaro and Laura. Justice had been served, and the weight of their crimes would no longer burden Marta and her team. With Alvaro and Laura removed from the picture, the focus returned to Marta and Don Ramon. The community, now fully aware of the injustice they had suffered, rallied behind them in an outpouring of support. Donations and volunteers began flooding into the Foundation, reinvigorating its mission and expanding its reach far beyond what had been previously imagined. In a meeting with the Foundation's board, Marta stood before them, her voice filled with gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. "We've endured so much, but every challenge has only made us stronger. Now, more than ever, we must dedicate ourselves to our mission of inclusion and justice. This is just the beginning." Luisa, who had been a quiet yet unwavering presence throughout the ordeal, finally spoke up. Her voice carried the pride and wisdom of someone who had grown immensely from the experience. "Mom, I'm so proud of you and all of us. We've proven that truth and justice will always prevail, no matter the odds." Don Ramon, moved by the moment, added with emotion in his voice, "Marta, Luisa, what we've accomplished together is nothing short of extraordinary. But as remarkable as this victory is, it's just the start. We have a bright future ahead, filled with new possibilities and the opportunity to make a lasting impact." The room filled with applause, the sound of optimism and unity reverberating through the air. The revitalized foundation had become a powerful symbol of resilience and hope for the entire community. It was a testament to the strength of those who stand for truth, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. However, while Alvaro and Laura were now behind bars, the story was far from over. The echoes of their revenge still lingered in the shadows. One of Alvaro's former partners, a dark and vengeful man named Ricardo, harbored a deep grudge over his friend's downfall. Ricardo, who had always operated from the fringes of legality, was determined to avenge Alvaro's defeat. He knew Don Ramon and Marta's vulnerabilities and was willing to use that knowledge to exact his revenge. Ricardo began to quietly lay the groundwork for his plan, studying every move of the foundation and its leaders. His presence loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon, a reminder that even in victory, vigilance was necessary. For Marta, Don Ramon, and Luisa, the journey was far from over. They had overcome one great challenge, but new threats were beginning to emerge, ones that would test their resolve and unity in ways they could not yet foresee. But with their bond strengthened by the trials they had already faced, they were ready to confront whatever came next, knowing that together they could face any darkness that threatened their hard-won peace. Ricardo, who had managed to keep a low profile throughout Alvaro's trial, now began to orchestrate his own plans for revenge. His mind, sharp and calculating, churned with schemes to dismantle everything that Don Ramon and Marta had built. Unlike Alvaro, who had been rash and overt in his actions, Ricardo was patient. He understood that a direct assault would be too risky and likely to fail, so he opted for a more insidious approach, working from the shadows to slowly erode their efforts over time. He began his campaign by spreading subtle rumors within the community, planting seeds of doubt about the true intentions of the foundation. Ricardo reached out to influential figures, hinting that the foundation's rapid success might be too good to be true, insinuating that there might be corruption beneath the surface. He never made direct accusations, but his carefully chosen words began to take root, especially among those prone to suspicion. Simultaneously, Ricardo started digging into Don Ramon's business dealings, searching for any small flaw or oversight he could exploit. He knew that if he could tarnish Don Ramon's reputation, it would ripple through the community and weaken Marta's position as well. Ricardo meticulously assembled a dossier filled with half-truths and exaggerations, biding his time until the moment was right to strike. Unaware of the dark clouds forming on the horizon, Marta and Don Ramon remained focused on their mission. The foundation continued to expand its reach, helping more people than ever before. However, Ricardo's influence was beginning to manifest, as whispers of doubt spread through the community, undermining the trust that had been so painstakingly rebuilt. Luisa, always perceptive, noticed the shift in people's attitudes and quickly brought her concerns to her mother. "Mom, I've been hearing things. People are starting to question the foundation again. I don't understand why, especially after everything we've done to prove ourselves." Marta, concerned but resolute, replied, "We've faced challenges before, Luisa, and we've overcome them. We'll do the same this time. But we need to be vigilant and tackle these rumors directly. We cannot allow doubt to take hold again." As the tension in the community mounted, Marta and Don Ramon began preparing to confront whatever new threat lay ahead, unaware that Ricardo was the mastermind behind the growing unease. The fight for truth and justice was far from over, and they would need every ounce of their strength and unity to withstand the new wave of adversity. One night, as Marta was preparing to wind down after a long day, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was low and ominous. "Be careful. Not all enemies have been defeated," it warned before abruptly hanging up. Alarmed, Marta immediately arranged a meeting with Don Ramon and Luisa. "We can't let our guard down," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "There's something more happening here, and we have to be ready for anything." The following afternoon began like any other, with Marta immersed in her work at the Foundation's office. She was reviewing financial reports when she received a call from Luisa's school. The voice on the other end was filled with concern. "Marta, Luisa wasn't picked up by her usual transport, and she's not at school. We've tried calling her, but she's not answering." Marta's heart stopped. A wave of fear washed over her as she processed the news. Without hesitation, she called Don Ramon, who immediately sprang into action, mobilizing his network of private security contacts and alerting the police. As the search for Luisa began, Marta's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message read, "You've ignored the warnings. Now you'll face the consequences. If you want to see your daughter again, drop all charges against Alvaro and Laura." The message was clear and terrifying, sending a cold wave of dread through Marta. She felt a mix of fear and unbridled rage. She knew that giving in to this blackmail wasn't an option, but she also understood the urgency of the situation. Every minute counted. Marta quickly showed the message to Don Ramon, who frowned deeply as he read it. "This is the work of a desperate man," Don Ramon said, his voice thick with concern. "We can't let them get away with this, Marta." At Don Ramon's mansion, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Marta paced back and forth, her mind racing, unable to sit still. The police arrived promptly, but so did Don Ramon's private security team, led by a man named Miguel, who was an expert in handling crisis situations like this. "We'll find Luisa, Mrs. Marta," Miguel assured her, his tone firm and determined. "We've got a few leads already, and we're working on tracing the origin of the message." Marta, though grateful for their efforts, was barely holding it together. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of fear, imagining the worst-case scenarios for Luisa. She knew she had to stay strong, but the weight was excruciating. "Miguel, please," Marta's voice trembled as she spoke. "Find her. I can't lose her. I don't know what I'll do if something happens to her." Meanwhile, in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Ricardo watched Luisa with a smug sense of control. He was confident that his plan would force Marta to back down. But despite her fear, Luisa remained remarkably calm, drawing on the strength her mother had always taught her to find in difficult moments. "Don't try anything stupid," girl, Ricardo warned, his voice cold and detached. "This will all be over soon if your mother does as she's told." Luisa, summoning every ounce of courage, met Ricardo's gaze with defiance. "My mother won't give in to your threats," she said, her voice steady and clear despite the fear gnawing at her. "She's stronger than you think." Ricardo smirked, clearly underestimating both Marta and Luisa's resilience. "We'll see about that," he replied, dismissing her words. "But if she values your life, she'll make the right choice." Back at the mansion, Miguel's team worked relentlessly, utilizing every resource and connection to track down Luisa. As the minutes turned into agonizing hours, Marta's fear deepened, but so did her resolve. She refused to let Ricardo dictate her actions, determined not to be a victim of his twisted game. Suddenly, Miguel's radio crackled to life with a breakthrough. "We've traced the message to a location on the outskirts," he announced. "We're mobilizing now, but we need to be cautious. Ricardo is dangerous." Marta's heart leapt in her chest, a mix of relief and renewed anxiety surging through her. "I'm coming with you," she insisted, her voice leaving no room for argument. Miguel hesitated, recognizing the determination in Marta's eyes. "All right," he conceded, "but you need to stay safe and follow our lead. Let us handle Ricardo." The team quickly prepared to move out, with Marta joining them despite the risks. The drive to the warehouse was tense, each passing second amplifying the urgency in Marta's heart. She was determined to see this through, to rescue Luisa and put an end to Ricardo's reign of terror. As they approached the location, Miguel laid out the plan. "We'll surround the building and move in swiftly. Marta, stay close to me and follow my instructions. We'll get Luisa out safely." With the team in position, they moved in silently, the night air thick with anticipation. As they breached the warehouse, a scuffle broke out between the security team and Ricardo's men. The tension was palpable as Marta anxiously waited to see her daughter. Finally, amidst the chaos, Marta saw Luisa, unharmed but visibly shaken, being led out by one of Miguel's team members. Tears of relief welled up in Marta's eyes as she rushed to embrace her daughter, holding her tight as if she would never let go. Ricardo, realizing his plan had failed, attempted to flee but was quickly apprehended by the security team. His confident smirk was replaced by a look of defeat as he was taken into custody, his threats now meaningless. As the dust settled, Marta and Luisa were escorted back to the safety of Don Ramon's mansion. The nightmare had come to an end, but the emotional scars would take time to heal. "Mom, I knew you'd come for me," Luisa whispered, clinging to Marta. "I'll always come for you," Marta replied, her voice filled with the fierce love of a mother who had just faced her worst fears and emerged victorious. With Ricardo behind bars, Marta and Don Ramon knew that the threat had been neutralized, but they also understood that the battle for justice was far from over. They would continue to stand strong, united in their mission, knowing that together they could overcome any obstacle thrown their way. The team moved swiftly and silently, with Marta and Don Ramon close behind. The tension was palpable as they neared the old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Miguel signaled for silence, and the team fanned out, surrounding the building, each member ready for the rescue operation. Inside, Ricardo's composure began to crack. He paced nervously, sensing that time was running out. Luisa, observing his growing unease, decided to take a chance. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "There's still time to make things right." Ricardo turned to glare at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and doubt. Deep down, he knew she was right, but his pride and desperation wouldn't allow him to admit it, let alone back down. Suddenly, the warehouse door burst open with a loud crash, and Miguel's team stormed in, moving with precision and speed. Ricardo instinctively reached for his weapon, but before he could make a move, he was tackled to the ground and disarmed by the security team. Marta, who had been just behind the team, rushed forward the moment she saw Luisa. She enveloped her daughter in a tight embrace, tears streaming down both their faces as the relief of the moment overwhelmed them. "I'm here, sweetheart." "You're safe now," Marta whispered, her voice breaking as she held Luisa close, as if she would never let go. Ricardo, now restrained and being led away by the security team, realized the full weight of his failure. He had underestimated the strength and resolve of Marta and her daughter, and it had led to his downfall. As he was escorted out of the warehouse, Ricardo's eyes briefly met Marta's, but he saw no fear, only the fierce protectiveness of a mother who had faced her worst nightmare and won. Back at Don Ramon's mansion, Marta, Luisa, and Don Ramon gathered in the sitting room, the adrenaline of the night slowly giving way to exhaustion and reflection. "We've been through so much," Marta said, her voice filled with emotion. "But we're still standing, and we're stronger because of it." Don Ramon nodded, his gaze softening as he looked at Luisa with pride. "You were incredibly brave, Luisa. You never gave up, and that's what saved you." Luisa managed a small, grateful smile, still shaken but relieved to be home. "I learned from the best," she said, her eyes meeting her mother's, conveying a depth of gratitude and admiration. As the night wound down, they all knew that while the immediate threat had been neutralized, the road ahead would still be filled with challenges. Yet they also understood that their bond had been strengthened by the ordeal. The battle for justice and truth was far from over, but with their unbreakable bond and unwavering determination, they knew they could face whatever came their way. Back at the warehouse, the scene played out just as Marta had feared, yet with a resolute determination she hadn't realized she possessed. The ransom message replayed in her mind, haunting her every thought as she frantically coordinated with Don Ramon and Miguel. Every second felt like an eternity, but as the SUV raced toward the warehouse, Marta's resolve hardened. "We've traced the signal from the message. It's coming from an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city," Miguel reported, entering the room with a map spread out before them. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed the urgency of the situation. "We need to act fast." "Let's go," Marta said without hesitation. Her voice was laced with determination, her mind made up. "I'm not going to wait here while my daughter is in danger." Don Ramon, ever the protector, approached Marta with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Marta, let the professionals handle this. I don't want you to put yourself in danger." But Marta's resolve was unwavering. "She's my daughter, Ramon. I won't stay behind. I'm going with you," she insisted, her voice firm and unyielding. Without further argument, they quickly made their way to a black SUV, accompanied by several members of the security team. The drive to the warehouse was tense, each person lost in their thoughts. Marta stared out the window, her mind a swirl of worries and fears, but also a fierce determination to bring her daughter back safe and sound. As the SUV drew closer to the warehouse, the team prepared for what lay ahead. The silence inside the vehicle was heavy, punctuated only by the occasional murmur of final instructions from Miguel. Marta, though outwardly composed, felt her heart racing, each beat a reminder of the stakes. She had come too far, fought too hard, to let fear take over now. Finally, the SUV came to a stop, and the team quickly moved into position. The next moments would determine everything. As they approached the warehouse, Marta knew that no matter what happened, she would fight for Luisa with every ounce of strength she had left. The door was breached, and chaos erupted. But in the end, it was Marta's love, courage, and relentless determination that saw them through the darkness. As the dawn broke over the city, Marta held her daughter close, knowing that while the battle had been hard fought, they had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever the future might hold together. Meanwhile, inside the dimly lit warehouse, Luisa sat huddled in a dark corner, her hands bound tightly. Ricardo kept a close watch on her, his confidence masking the anxiety simmering beneath the surface. He was certain that his plan would force Marta to capitulate, but he couldn't entirely shake the uneasy feeling that gnawed at him. "Your mother won't take long to give in," Ricardo said, his voice laced with disdain. "All this will be over soon." But Luisa, despite her fear, refused to show any weakness. She lifted her chin, her voice steady as she replied, "My mom never gives up. She'll come for me, and you'll regret doing this." Ricardo laughed, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He knew that Marta and Don Ramon were formidable, and underestimating them might be the greatest mistake he could make. Outside, Miguel had deployed his team around the perimeter of the warehouse. Every second felt crucial, the tension thick in the night air. Marta and Don Ramon remained by the vehicle, their eyes locked on the building as the security team prepared to move in. "Miguel, please make sure nothing happens to Luisa." Marta's voice wavered, a mixture of fear and unyielding determination driving her plea. Miguel nodded firmly, understanding the weight of her words. "I promise, Mrs. Marta. We'll get her out quickly and safely." At Miguel's signal, the security team moved with precision, silently infiltrating the warehouse. The moments that followed were agonizing for Marta and Don Ramon, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. Then, The sounds of a struggle and shouted orders echoed from inside the building. Adrenaline coursed through them as they braced for what was to come. Finally, the warehouse doors burst open, and Miguel emerged, carrying Luisa securely in his arms. Marta's heart leapt with a mix of overwhelming relief and emotion as she rushed forward. Tears streamed down her face as she embraced her daughter, the fear that had gripped her heart melting away. "Luisa." "Oh, thank God," Marta cried, holding her daughter close, never wanting to let go. Luisa, though visibly shaken, was unharmed. She clung tightly to her mother, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I knew you'd come, Mom. I knew you'd find me." As this tender reunion unfolded, Ricardo was forcibly led out of the warehouse by the security team, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back. His face was contorted with anger and frustration, the bitter taste of defeat evident in his glare. "You think you've won, but this isn't over," he spat venomously, his eyes fixed on Marta and Don Ramon. Marta, still holding Luisa protectively, met Ricardo's gaze with a fierce resolve. "You've lost, Ricardo. You made a terrible mistake, and now you'll have to face the consequences of your actions." Ricardo was handed over to the authorities, his threats ringing hollow in the night air as he was taken away. The tension that had gripped Marta and Don Ramon finally began to ease, and they allowed themselves to breathe a sigh of relief. The ordeal had been harrowing, but they had come through it, stronger and more united than ever before. Luisa was safe, and the bond between them had proven unbreakable. Back at Don Ramon's mansion, the atmosphere was one of profound relief and gratitude. Miguel and his team were commended for their swift and decisive action, and Marta and Don Ramon took a moment to reflect on the challenges they had faced. They knew that their enemies would not easily relent, but they were more determined than ever to continue their fight for justice. As they sat together, recovering from the day's events, Marta looked at Luisa and managed a smile through her tears. "We're stronger than they think, and as long as we have each other, we can face anything." Don Ramon, his heart swelling with pride for both Marta and Luisa, nodded in agreement. "We've walked through the fire, and we've come out stronger on the other side. Nothing will break us now." The night ended with a quiet sense of triumph. Though the threat had been very real, their unity and determination had seen them through. And as dawn approached, casting its soft light over the horizon, they knew that whatever challenges awaited them in the future, they would face them together, as a family, with a bond that could not be broken. Suddenly, Miguel emerged from the warehouse, carrying Luisa safely in his arms. Marta's heart leaped as she saw them, and she sprinted toward them, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Luisa," Marta cried out, her voice breaking with emotion as she pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. "I'm here, sweetheart. Everything's okay now. You're safe." Luisa, still trembling from the ordeal, clung to her mother with all the strength she could muster. "I knew you'd come for me, Mom. I knew you would," she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of fear and relief. Don Ramon joined the embrace, his eyes welling up with tears as he held both Marta and Luisa close. "We're together now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "No one will ever hurt us again." The nightmare had ended, but Marta knew deep down that the repercussions of this act of revenge were far from disappearing. The battle they had fought was only one chapter in a much larger, more complicated story. If you have any feedback or suggestions, please share them in the comments. If you find this story engaging, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Your support helps me bring you more stories like this one. Thank you, and many blessings to you. The news struck Don Ramon's mansion like a thunderbolt, sending waves of shock, fear, and anger through its inhabitants. Marta, Don Ramon, and Luisa were gathered in the living room, trying to regain a sense of normalcy when Don Ramon's phone rang. The moment he answered, his expression changed drastically, reflecting a mix of disbelief and concern. "How could Laura have been released?" Don Ramon exclaimed, his voice trembling with fury. "That's impossible." Marta felt a cold knot form in her stomach upon hearing those words. Panic began to set in as they turned on the television, only to see Laura walking out of the prison, her face alight with a smug, triumphant smile as she was surrounded by a throng of journalists. "This can't be happening," Marta murmured, feeling as though the ground was slipping out from under her. It felt like her world, which she had fought so hard to hold together, was crumbling once again. Laura, freed and filled with a renewed sense of vengeance, wasted no time. Her time in prison had only sharpened her resolve, and she had meticulously designed a plan to destroy Marta and Don Ramon once and for all. She reconnected with her network, coordinating strategic moves to strike at them from multiple fronts. The look in her eyes as she exited the prison made it clear she was out for blood. Back at Don Ramon's mansion, the atmosphere was tense and foreboding. Security was immediately reinforced, and every precaution was taken, but the fear of what Laura might do next was palpable. They all knew too well that Laura was capable of anything, and the sense of impending doom hung over them like a dark cloud. That night, as the household tried to find some semblance of rest, Marta's phone rang, piercing the silence with its sharp tone. Her heart raced as she answered, dread pooling in her stomach. "Hello," Marta answered, her voice edged with exhaustion and weariness. "Hello," Marta, came Laura's venomous voice on the other end of the line, sending a chill down Marta's spine. "Surprised to hear from me? I just wanted to tell you that this isn't over, it's only just beginning. Enjoy every moment of peace you have left, because it won't last." Marta's hand shook as she gripped the phone, a cold sweat breaking out across her skin. Laura's threat was like a dagger, driving home the realization that the peace they had fought so hard for was now hanging by a thread. As she slowly lowered the phone, her mind raced. She knew that whatever Laura had planned next would be far worse than anything they had faced before. Turning to Don Ramon, Marta's voice was steady, but her eyes reflected the fear and determination that warred within her. "We need to be ready. Laura won't stop until she's torn us apart. But we faced her before, and we'll face her again." Don Ramon nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. "We won't let her win, Marta. We'll do whatever it takes to protect our family." As the night wore on, the household remained on high alert, each of them bracing for the storm they knew was coming. The battle for survival, for justice, and for their future was far from over. But with their unbreakable bond and fierce determination, Marta, Don Ramon, and Luisa knew that they would stand together against whatever came their way, no matter how dark the path ahead might be. Marta felt a chill run down her spine as she hung up the phone. She hurried to the living room where Don Ramon and Luisa were already awake, alerted by the sudden movements of the security team. "It was Laura," Marta said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "She called to threaten me. She said this isn't over, that it's just beginning." Don Ramon's expression darkened, his mind racing as he processed the situation. "We can't let her intimidate us, Marta. We need to stay one step ahead of her. Let's call a meeting with our entire security team and our lawyers. This time we won't leave any loose ends." Meanwhile, Laura wasted no time in executing her plan with precision. From her hideout, she tapped into her vast network of contacts and hidden financial resources, orchestrating a series of calculated attacks on Don Ramon's company and Marta's foundation. Leaks to the press, internal sabotage, and veiled threats began to undermine the stability of both institutions. Laura's psychological warfare was as relentless as it was effective, sowing seeds of doubt and fear. One morning, as Marta and Don Ramon reviewed the latest damage inflicted by Laura's machinations, Miguel, the head of security, entered the room with a grave expression. "We've received credible information that Laura is planning something big," Miguel reported, his voice tense. "We don't have all the details yet, but we know she's gathering dangerous people, mercenaries, by the looks of it." Marta's determination flared. We need to protect not just our family, but also our employees and everyone who depends on us. We're going to take more drastic measures. We can't let her destroy everything we've worked for. As Laura's plans began to unfold, she watched from her hideout with cold satisfaction. She knew that wearing down her enemies mentally was just as crucial as any physical assault. But Laura also understood that she needed a final, decisive blow, something that would completely shatter Marta and Don Ramon's world. That night, sleep eluded Marta. The weight of responsibility, combined with the fear for her family's safety, pressed down on her like a suffocating blanket. But in the midst of her turmoil, a spark of determination ignited within her. She knew she couldn't let Laura win. The battle was far from over, and they had to be prepared for whatever came next. As the days passed, Laura's release had set off alarm bells at Don Ramon's mansion. Marta and Don Ramon understood that they were up against a cunning and vengeful adversary. Security measures were doubled, and everyone in the household was placed on high alert. Meanwhile, Laura continued to gather her network of allies, each one more dangerous than the last, ready to strike at the opportune moment. One afternoon, while Marta was reviewing the latest security reports, she received an urgent call from Miguel. "Mrs. Marta." Miguel's voice crackled over the phone, filled with urgency. "We've confirmed that Laura has hired a group of mercenaries for a direct attack. We need to prepare for the worst." Marta felt her heart skip a beat, but she steadied herself. "Do whatever it takes, Miguel. We can't allow them to catch us by surprise." As night fell, the tension in the mansion was thick enough to cut with a knife. Guards patrolled the grounds, their eyes scanning every shadow, and every family member was prepared for any eventuality. Near midnight, the silence was shattered by a deafening blast, a powerful explosion that rocked the mansion, followed by the sound of gunfire and panicked screams. "They're here," Miguel shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos as he quickly organized the guards to repel the attack. Marta and Don Ramon, their instincts kicking in, rushed to the basement where Luisa and other family members had taken refuge. The air was thick with panic, but Marta forced herself to remain calm, wrapping her arms around Luisa to comfort her. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Marta whispered, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging outside. "We're safe here. We won't let anything happen to us." Outside, Laura's mercenaries advanced with ruthless efficiency, but they were met with fierce resistance from the mansion's well-trained security guards. The night was lit by the muzzle flashes of weapons and the sounds of battle. From a safe distance, Laura watched the scene unfold, a cold smile on her lips. She was confident that her plan would finally bring down her enemies, leaving nothing but ruin in her wake. Inside the basement, Marta's mind raced as she held Luisa close. She knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. They needed a plan to survive the night and turn the tide against Laura's onslaught. "Miguel is out there fighting for us," Don Ramon said, his voice a mix of urgency and reassurance. "We have to trust that he'll hold them off until help arrives." Marta nodded, though her heart pounded with fear. "We'll get through this," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "We have to." As the battle raged on, it became clear that this was more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything they held dear: their family, their legacy, and the future they had worked so hard to build. And though the odds seemed insurmountable, Marta knew one thing for certain: they would not go down without a fight. Don Ramon, weapon in hand, joined Miguel and the security team at the front lines, his age no barrier to the fierce determination that burned in his eyes. Despite the years that had passed, his courage was as unshakable as ever. The battle was intense and brutal, with both sides suffering casualties. The mercenaries, well-trained and heavily armed, advanced with cold precision, pushing the defenders to their limits. Amidst the chaos, Marta realized that they couldn't hold out forever. She made a bold and decisive choice. "We can't stay here, Ramon. We need to get Louisa and the others out of the mansion. There's an escape tunnel in the basement. It's our only chance." Don Ramon, though reluctant to leave the fight, knew Marta was right. He nodded, his resolve firm. "Take Louisa and the others through the tunnel. Miguel and I will hold them off as long as we can." Without wasting a second, Marta gathered Louisa and the other family members, leading them to the basement. The tunnel, a secret passage Don Ramon had built years ago for emergencies, offered their best chance at survival. As they descended into the darkness, the sounds of battle above grew more distant, but the fear of being discovered made every step through the narrow passage feel like an eternity. Marta moved quickly, keeping her voice calm and steady to reassure the others, especially Louisa, who clung to her mother with unwavering trust. "Everything will be okay," Louisa Marta whispered, her words a promise and a prayer. "Just keep going. We're almost there." The tunnel seemed endless, but finally they reached the hidden exit that led out into a dense, nearby forest. Marta carefully helped everyone out, ensuring no one was left behind. Once outside, they huddled together in a dark clearing, trying to catch their breath and figure out what to do next. Back at the mansion, Don Ramon and Miguel fought with every ounce of strength they had left, but the enemy's numbers and firepower were overwhelming. Miguel, seeing that they were being overrun, turned to Don Ramon and shouted over the din of battle, "We have to retreat. We can't hold them off any longer." Don Ramon, recognizing the truth in Miguel's words, reluctantly agreed. "All right, let's fall back and regroup with the others. We can't let Laura win." Using their intimate knowledge of the mansion and its surroundings, Don Ramon and Miguel executed a strategic retreat. They moved through the grounds, evading the mercenaries and making their way toward the safety of the forest, where Marta and the others were waiting. In the forest clearing, Marta and Louisa, along with the rest of the family, anxiously awaited the return of Don Ramon and Miguel. The sounds of battle had diminished, but the tension in the air was still thick and heavy. Finally, Marta spotted two figures emerging from the shadows: Don Ramon and Miguel, bruised and exhausted, but alive. Papa Marta cried out, running toward Don Ramon, throwing her arms around him as relief flooded her. Don Ramon, holding his daughter tightly, replied, his voice choked with emotion, "I'm okay, Marta. We're all okay." Louisa, tears streaming down her face, joined the embrace, feeling a spark of hope for the first time since the attack began. In that moment, surrounded by her family, she knew they had survived something unimaginable. They had been pushed to the brink, but they were still together, and that was what mattered most. As they gathered in the clearing, catching their breath and regrouping, they knew the fight wasn't over. Laura's mercenaries had been beaten back, but the threat she posed still loomed large. Yet in that moment, amid the darkness and uncertainty, they also knew that as long as they stood together, they could face whatever came next. Don Ramon, his voice filled with quiet resolve, looked at his family. "We've made it through the worst of it, but we need to stay vigilant. Laura won't stop until she's taken everything from us, but she'll never succeed because we won't let her." Marta nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and determination. "We'll fight back, Ramon. We've already proven that together we're unstoppable." The family, though battered and weary, was united in their resolve. They would rebuild, they would protect each other, and they would not let Laura or anyone else tear them apart. As they huddled together in the forest, the night slowly gave way to dawn, bringing with it a renewed sense of purpose and the promise of a new beginning. Miguel, though injured and visibly exhausted, remained resolute in his commitment to protect Marta, Don Ramon, and their family. As they huddled together in the forest, the tension of the recent battle still fresh in their minds, the three of them discussed their next move. They all knew that running would only delay the inevitable. They had to confront Laura and her mercenaries directly, putting an end to the nightmare that had haunted them for too long. "We need to dismantle Laura's network from the inside," Miguel said, his voice filled with the steely resolve that had seen them through so many dangers. "I have contacts who can help us identify her allies and neutralize them. We can't just keep defending ourselves, we have to take the fight to her." Marta nodded in agreement, her eyes fierce with determination. "And we must act quickly, before Laura has a chance to regroup and strike again. We can't allow her to continue her reign of terror." Don Ramon, though physically drained, supported the plan with the same unwavering spirit that had carried him through the battle. "We're all in this together. This ends now. We're going to end this nightmare and restore peace to our lives." With Miguel's contacts providing vital information, Marta, Don Ramon, and their security team carefully planned their infiltration of Laura's hideout. The location was heavily fortified, a testament to Laura's paranoia and ruthlessness, but the team's resolve was unshakable. In a series of strategic and precise moves, they neutralized the guards and advanced deeper into the heart of the hideout. Finally, they reached the center of Laura's operation. Standing there, waiting for them with a smug, triumphant smile, was Laura herself. "Did you really think you could stop me?" Laura sneered, her eyes locked onto Marta with cold disdain. She reached for a concealed weapon, ready to strike, but before she could act, Luisa stepped forward with surprising courage. "Stop, Laura. We won't let you destroy us," Luisa said, her voice steady and filled with a maturity beyond her years. Her bravery caught Laura off guard, creating just enough of a distraction for Miguel to swiftly disarm her and pin her to the ground. Marta approached, her eyes filled not only with determination but also a deep compassion that had guided her throughout the ordeal. "This ends here, Laura. We won't let you continue hurting people," Marta said firmly, her voice leaving no room for doubt. With Laura subdued, the authorities were called in to take her into custody. This time, there were no loopholes, no influential contacts to save her from the consequences of her actions. Laura was imprisoned for her crimes, and the shadow she had cast over Marta and her family began to lift. Back at Don Ramon's mansion, the family gathered to reflect on the harrowing journey they had endured and the strength they had found in one another. The mansion, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now resonated with a sense of peace and resilience. "We've been through so much, but we've done it together," Don Ramon said, his voice rich with pride and emotion. "There's nothing we can't overcome as a family." Marta, looking at Luisa, felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and love. "The most important thing is that we're together and safe," she said, her voice soft but strong. "Nothing is more valuable than that." A few months later, the mansion was filled with laughter and celebration as the family hosted a gathering to mark their victory and the restoration of their lives. The foundation had flourished once more, stronger than ever, and the company had recovered from the setbacks it had faced. Marta and Don Ramon worked side by side, their bond fortified by the trials they had endured together. Luisa, now more confident and resilient, continued her studies and became actively involved in the foundation, inspired by her mother's courage and determination. As the family and their closest friends gathered in the grand hall, Marta stood to give an emotional speech, her heart full as she looked around at the faces of those she loved. "Today we celebrate not just our victory over the challenges we faced, but also the strength and love that held us together through it all," Marta said, her voice filled with emotion. "Together we've shown that love and justice always prevail, and that no matter how dark the path, we can overcome anything as long as we stand united." The room erupted in applause, the sound echoing with the triumph of a family that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger on the other side. As they toasted to their future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with the same courage, love, and unbreakable bond that had seen them through the worst. The family, united and stronger than ever, raised their glasses in a heartfelt toast to the future. The journey had been arduous, fraught with dangers and unimaginable challenges, but they had emerged victorious, bound more tightly together by the trials they had faced. The sense of triumph and unity that filled the room was palpable, a testament to their resilience and unwavering love for one another. Marta, Don Ramon, and Luisa had finally found the peace and stability they had longed for. Don Ramon's mansion, once a fortress in their time of need, had now become a symbol of hope and resilience, a place where the family could continue building a better future. Each member of the family played their part in creating a new chapter, one filled with the promise of brighter days. In the mansion's garden, under the gentle warmth of the sun, Marta, Don Ramon, and Luisa sat together, savoring a rare moment of tranquility. The garden, once a place of refuge, now blossomed with new life, mirroring the renewed spirit of the family. The scars of their struggle were still there, etched deep in their hearts, but so was their love and determination to move forward. "We faced the darkness and come out stronger," Marta said softly, taking Luisa's hand in hers. The warmth of her touch conveyed all the love and strength she had carried for her daughter throughout their ordeal. "Now it's time to live fully and in peace, to cherish the life we fought so hard to protect." Luisa, her heart swelling with gratitude, smiled up at her mother. "Thank you for never giving up, Mom. You're my hero," she said, her voice filled with admiration and love. As Don Ramon listened to the exchange, tears of profound pride welled up in his eyes. His voice was steady but thick with emotion as he spoke. "We are bound by the unbreakable ties of family, and nothing will ever change that. United, we have the strength to face and conquer any challenge that comes our way." The sun bathed the garden in a golden glow, casting long shadows that seemed to symbolize the past they were leaving behind. The family sat in silence for a moment, simply enjoying each other's presence, the weight of their shared experiences giving way to a serene peace. As we conclude this powerful story of resilience, family, and overcoming adversity, we invite you to reflect on the journey Marta, Don Ramon, and Luisa have taken. What have you learned from their experiences? Has their story inspired you in any way? We would love to hear from you. Please comment below with one lesson you've learned from this story that you will bring into your own life. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more incredible journeys with you. Thank you for watching.